In the countryside of my soul, there stand two cathedrals. In the countryside of my soul, there stand two cathedrals, very grand and very ancient. They are my home, my place of refuge, my very self. The first is composed of anguish and of rage, and was built laboriously, with great care, and the most meticulous attention to every last detail, over many decades, brick by brick. Its scaffolding is utterly familiar to me, for I was its architect, and within me, as well, are its masons, carpenters, sculptors, glaziers, and blacksmiths. The second is far smaller, and lies deep within a brambled forest, overgrown with black roses, honey locusts, and greenbrier vines. No outsider who is not intent on finding it is likely to stumble upon it. Its stones are black and weather-worn, its spires decayed and rusted. Deep within it there is a sanctuary in which I often linger, and where any visitor would likely find me, not that he'd wish to do so, or that I'd wish him to. For it is, above all else, solitude which I seek there. I drink of the waters which gush from its fountains, and in them bathe the pustules with which much of my flesh is covered. In this sanctuary there is an altar, and upon that altar lies my grief, where it flourishes, glows, and beckons, like the redeemed Grail at the end of Parsifal. It demands of me the most constant obeisance, and I haven't any choice other than to submit, nor any wish not to. My prayers are for the most part devout, although, at times, rather more ambivalent, and, on occasion, even resentful. No matter. It never occurs to me to neglect my devotions. To recite the daily prayers both nourishes me and leaves me famished, left as I am, when finished, starved of life, of agency, and of hope. I am a deeply devoted, essentially simple, and profoundly humble monk, whose daily bread consists of little other than attending and conducting services within the walls and in the sanctuaries of these two cathedrals, as well as the procuring and lighting of candles, of washing walls, pews, various implements of devotion, of sweeping up, of all the lowly and unassuming tasks required of me, services and tasks that cause my heart at times to bleed, and, at others, to shut down entirely. It is a posthumous life I have led these many years, and that I continue to lead. I am now nothing but a ghost who has walked the earth for many decades, playing at grief as best I can, yet remaining unwilling to offer up more than modest sums at its gaming table, for were I to lose badly there, it would spell death, my literal death, the death of this weak, fragile, and emaciated body in which I find myself still encased. A death which, needless to say, has its appeal at times, but the truth is that this ghost, the ghost who I have become, who is me, is a coward, a limping phantom, a phantom which each day drags itself along the cobblestones and wooden floors of these churches into their sanctuaries and altars, and which retreats every night to once again lie down in its bed, inside the charred and crumbling house in which it pokes and prods the ashes of its life, wondering why and how it has managed to make it through another day, before eventually relaxing sufficiently and allowing itself to disappear for a time in sleep. This phantom hasn't any need to travel to these churches, for they exist within it, that is to say, within me, and when I die, they shall disappear as well, unnoticed and unremarked upon, as they were in life. Are they beautiful? That I cannot say, nor does it matter. I know of no other churches with which I might compare them, for they are my very self. They are my very eyes. They are my very way of being in the world. I created and built these edifices, whose congregation consists of me only, and I willingly entered into this sacred, posthumous life, because to have remained alive, in her absence, would have been obscene. Perhaps the sin is somewhat less for me than it would have been for another, given that I am a ghost. Perhaps it's even forgivable. I'd like to think that true. And the fact that I still walk the earth suggests I at least half believe that it is true. It is without any question true that I have become a thing, this numb, bloodless, seemingly incorporeal being, and yet the embers that I feel occasionally roiling about in my guts suggest I've still got one foot kicking up the grass and moss in some abandoned cemetery which I have sought, and in which I find myself wildly gazing about in the mad hope that I might one day stumble upon a living woman who is appealing, of whom I can pretend to myself that I am fond, or, if she is not entirely appealing, at least doesn't appear to hate me, isn't frightened, and does not run away. I know perfectly well that the wish is foolish, that it is laughable, preposterous, and yet, even now, at this frightfully late date, I have not managed to entirely kill it. It comes unbidden to soothe and torment me in the altars of these temples which lie within me, and in those deserted graveyards in which I wander. Were I to scream and unleash all that is contained within me, the sun would turn black and fall immediately from the sky, the land and seas would freeze, the clouds and birds drop like stones, gargantuan tsunamis would swallow continents, and countless asteroids would be recalled from nearby solar systems to madly rush towards the belly of the earth. And, during all this, all the while, I would smile contentedly, applaud, I would laugh. I would, for those moments, feel myself once again alive. There would no longer be any need of these churches, these ponderous, foul, and hateful synagogues which I created, carry, and bear within me. I would make of nature my slave. I would destroy her, slice her belly open, rip her womb to shreds, so that she could no longer generate anything, of any kind, whether living or inert. This, for me, would be the most delicious and most deserved sort of vengeance, one which would compensate me for the catastrophe which has been my life, and it is precisely the one which so endlessly torments me because I am unable to bring it about. I would be reborn in that inferno, had I the power to create it. Nay, rather, I would be born for the first time. The locked vault in which I have been so long entombed would be cracked wide open. There would no longer be any need for irony, and for the innumerable, arrogant, eviscerating words which pour so frequently from my mouth. And once my body had shaken for sufficiently long, and with sufficient violence, there would descend upon me a sacred silence, a peace of which I've only dreamed and never known, but that I am somehow able to imagine. I would look upon all the annihilation which I had just caused, and which would now lie before me with new eyes. And what was left of the world would, as a result, for the very first time, be beautiful. I would no longer have any reasons to feel contempt or disgust, no longer be forced to listen to the involuntary, farcical protestations of faux love which too frequently dribble from my mouth, drenched, as they are, in artificially sweetened saliva and the arsenic-laced acids of my stomach and spirit. All those things would simply vanish, for there would no longer be any need of them. It's hard to envisage who I might then be, who I would become, who it might be that I'd allow myself to become, or with what tools I might construct this new self. How can a shriveled, hunchbacked golem, who for so long has stumbled about, bleeding hot lava from his pores and spewing it out of his mouth, imagine himself a sort of Olympian god? It's rather more likely that I would simply remain the very same foul, misshapen creature I am at present, still ranting at the void, suffocated beneath magma, cinders, and ashes, and looking about in vain for a person, preferably a woman, who might help, a woman who has never existed, does not now exist, and most certainly will not exist in the devastated landscape about which I so frequently fantasize creating. No, none of this. Enough. Away with all this fantastical nonsense. I am a devout monk now, little else, nothing else, and it must necessarily suffice. My duty is to the places of worship I have created, in which I live, and from which I shall never escape. What I can manage now to do is to grow dumb, like an indrawn breath, to become completely mute, even though my soul still so constantly howls for connection, and my bowels are bloated and distended with longing. No matter, I must cease speaking. I will not flood others. I will not flood, above all, her, with this ache. For her, I will push back this avalanche, push down this spewing jet stream of my hunger and need. Let it all bury me. That's inevitable and already ongoing. So be it. I'd much prefer to implode by the side of the road, or starve to death on the top of some frozen mountain, than hurt this woman whom I so cherish. She is luminous, and because she is luminous, she makes me desperately want to say everything. And yet that is quite precisely why I shall never speak a word. I want so desperately to say it all, everything, and yet not a word shall again pass from my lips in the presence of others. If and when I happen upon them, I shall likely continue to bellyache, to rage, to hurl my laughable Lilliputian lightning bolts, because none of them matter. Only she matters. Longing is not love, although I spent a lifetime confusing the two. Longing carps, complains, and grovels. Love is quiet listening, stillness, prayer. I still feel the need, the hunger, the longing. It eats away at me incessantly. There is this horrid buffalo hump, which houses a ferocious, ravenous beast at the base of my neck. It has been there for decades, growing ever larger. There are vanishingly few moments in which it neglects to choke me, and the threat of its suffocating me is nearly constant. There are very few others able to see it. It is my need, my hunger, craving, bitterness, longing. It is the ravenous vulture from whose grip I am never released, and which so ceaselessly feeds on my flesh. Yet, for the most part, it is only I that ever sees it, and is aware of its existence, and only me that it so furiously chokes and so frequently attempts to strangle. I have never once observed it to hover over or peck at the flesh of another. When I speak with her, or am merely in her presence, I am terrified the beast might slip its leash, make of me a sort of lovesick projection machine, a laughable, two-bit bard of desperation, babbling this or that inanity in a ridiculous, thoroughly contemptible effort to feel alive, which I haven't been or felt myself to be for decades, and which, more likely, I've never been or felt myself to be. And yet, with her, there are these powerful hints and intuitions, wrong-headed as they are, yet so impossible to ignore that such a thing might be possible. From what materials do I construct these fantasies, these hopeless ambitions, these almost expectations? Not from anything I ever experienced. Of that I am entirely sure. Ridiculous. I am ridiculous. This is so altogether ridiculous. I am disgusting. That child within me, who so often whispers, "If someone innocent and kind would only love me, perhaps I'd not be so entirely lost. If someone tender and vulnerable were to simply see me, somehow come to know me, perhaps I might still manage to be touched, cared for, saved. Dear God, would it be possible for me, or anyone who has ever had such thoughts, who possessed such an inner voice which spoke to him in so revolting a manner, to be more nauseating and loathsome? I am starving, yes, but there is no intrinsic shame in being malnourished. That, in and of itself, is forgivable. To break character, however, would be appalling. To let go of that aloof, sardonic, arrogant, cold-as-fuck character, to drop the mask to which I have been so long habituated and to which I have so long clung, for a duration sufficient to reveal the young boy within, that is impossible. Everything I have just described is no longer a mask. I am no longer some costumed character, constantly vigilant whether he needs to silence some more authentic self, lurking about within him. There is not the slightest chance that I will let rise, or could even let rise, to the surface that vile, needy, naive child who at times still seems to be slinking around deep within my bowels, much less let him speak to say his piece. He shall rather hold both his tongue and his peace forever. I wish him dead, and, indeed, I think he might very well be close to being so. It is, presently, only on rare occasions that I become aware of his lamely stirring within me, deep within my guts, his mucking about there, or imagine that I hear what most usually seem only the faintest echoes of his bitter tears, sighs, and moans. He awakes in me when I have the rare misfortune of becoming aware of his presence, not to mention the nagging persistence with which he makes that presence known, when he tugs at my pant leg with his needy, tearful, red, swollen, pinched eyes, the wish to piss on him, to throttle him, to beat him senseless, to, at the very least, slam the door shut on him in shame, horror, and disgust, taking great care to attempt to ensure that he have no opportunity to show himself again. That snivelling idiot, that brat, that hideous, snot-filled toddler, the one who still somehow manages to think and believe that there might exist some woman who could tolerate both his beauty and his gore, both the flecks of light and the sewers full of shit within him which they illumine, someone who stays, in spite of the discomfort which he causes her. He knows as well as I that there has never been, is not now, and will never be any such person. That child, splayed out and weeping on the floor, that bleeding, sobbing, insufferable beggar, who still believes that there will momentarily appear some good mommy, a mommy who will, at any moment, burst through the door, scoop him up, take him in her arms, and make it all stop. Make this nightmare end, care for him, love him. My life has been spent standing on the head of a pin buried in the ashes of that foolish, utterly deranged hope, still half wearing the clothes of that contemptible whining boy, who was, and is, shrouded, scourged, and encased within breastplates, and all the other countless pieces of armour in which he still sometimes walks the earth, and wearing the mask of a man who needs nothing. Not wearing, for it was long ago glued to his face with the most indestructible of adhesives. Yet there he is still, that vile boy, creaking under the floorboards of every relationship, every betrayal, every loss, every death, weeping, whining, singing his poorly composed and executed elegies, begging, imploring, astonished at the violence still being inflicted on him, and unable to rise from the floor, pinned to it, as he is, in his disbelief. Is he not to be once again spat upon? Was that not then, and is it not now, his destiny? What he, in fact, deserved then, and continues to deserve. Of course, precisely so. That inner child was a victim of fate, of necessity. It was all, almost certainly, although in a way which can never be quite understood, his fault, his doing. Whether it was karma, some metaphysical bit of folly cribbed from an uncharacteristically foolish, speculative essay of Schopenhauer, or, perhaps, simply a bit of snot that went this way, rather than that when the Big Bang crapped this shithole of a universe into existence. The reasons for his lamentable existence and fate do not ultimately matter in the least, and they shall never be entirely discovered or enumerated. What we do know is this: that little piece of shit deserved nothing then, and deserves nothing now. And I, who was once, sadly, him, will take great pains to make quite certain that this be exactly what he shall receive from this moment on. Monumental agony, bathed in the contempt of its giver. I hate that little boy. I would do far worse to him than anyone else ever did, had I the chance. Were he to walk into this room now, in the flesh, or to crawl into it, with his snot-filled nose, with his tear-filled beseeching eyes, I'd not befriend him. I would eviscerate him, disembowel him, flay him alive, and like my mother, enjoy every moment of it. It's him I see in everyone, in all those I pretend to loathe in his stead, and in every last aspect of the entire world which I pretend to loathe as well. But above all else, and above all others, it is him I loathe in myself. But does not habit turn all this pretense, all this projection into reality? Is it not them I now truly, actually hate? Do I not, having travelled so far, and having become so accustomed, so habituated to such feelings, do I not now honestly wish to incinerate the planet, to gut the sun? I do. Indeed, I do. This is now who and what I am, what I have become. No one and nothing other than this. If this were at one time only armour, it has now become flesh, my flesh. That boy is long dead and gone. What remains is only the most impotent of shadows, a phantom. And yet, I know perfectly well that all it would take would be for some lovely woman, whom I chanced upon, perhaps sitting in an alley, famished, poorly dressed, hopelessly, effortlessly, and deliciously vulnerable, who had given up both on herself and on everyone else, and who was now far too proud and exhausted to beg, for that desperately still longed for woman to simply say, "I see you are bleeding there, sir. Is there anything I can do?" And it would all fall away in a heartbeat. This pose, these church robes, all the ceremonies, altars, sanctuaries, forests, they would disappear, all of them, on the spot. But do not speak to me of such things, of these other very different shrines, sanctuaries, and places of worship, whose sermons I no longer possess the ears to hear. I venerate now only the gods of grief and rage. It is to them I have devoted, and to them that I continue to devote my life, and I could never and shall never abandon them. Were that brat to somehow stumble upon one of their premises, I would no longer recognize him, and, whether I did or did not, I would, seeing him for what he is, simply do the Lord's bidding, that is to say, I would slit his throat, flay him alive, and incinerate him upon the altar of my rage, without a second thought, in the service of, and within the sanctuary of, what I have become, of who and what I now am. If I could have spared the two of us the pain of being born, of having existed in the first place, that would be another matter. But who is that lucky? Neither he nor I. He knew then what I know now, what it means to be alive, and we both agree. Neither of us should have ever come into this world. We are mistakes, abominations of nature, that nature whom I am, at least at times, able to love, appreciate, and take pleasure in, but whom I far more often abhor and wish to annihilate, to extinguish, to massacre. I find, now and then, that I am tempted to think myself noble. I flatter myself, fancy myself a sort of truth-teller, even something of an admirable fellow. But that despicably grandiose, disgusting notion inevitably disintegrates into dust, moments after I notice myself entertaining it. I recognize it for what it is, and it vanishes on the spot. And, as a consequence, I am then quite automatically plagued with the most abominable self-loathing, although that also, on a moment's reflection, reveals itself to be just another variety of vanity, another sort of grandiosity, self-love by another name, self-love simply wearing other clothes. On occasions such as these, it has merely dressed itself up in a sort of fashionable hair shirt, picked up perhaps at some two-bit thrift shop, run by a former social worker who's lost her license for malpractice and worn, for a moment, in the hope that self-deprecation might indeed be a way to get others to like me, a strategy I have often heard and which is frequently recommended, although there's not a grain of truth in it. All of it, all of this, all of them, every last bit. The paralysed 4-year-old on the floor, the nasty, sarcastic bastard, the cosmic sadist who would blow up the universe in a heartbeat, all of them would disappear had I but 90 seconds lying next to the warm body of some woman of whom I could pretend to myself I was fond. But even were that to be the case, I am all too habituated, too accustomed to being all those other selves, the sarcastic one, the spiteful one, the faux brilliant, cynical, burned out one, the one who weeps what seem real tears, even in that moment to he that weeps them, but who hates himself for it 5 minutes later. It's all so very boring. I have become a rather poorly dressed Duchess of Guermantes, the one of whom Proust so endlessly writes, and with such delightful disdain, hopelessly contemptuous of, and bored by all the parties which she resents having to give, but which she none the less secretly enjoys, for she knows nothing else, has never known or been taught anything else, and lacks the self-awareness to recognize any of the lies she so long ago learned to tell herself concerning such events and matters. I am hopelessly, relentlessly contemptuous of, and bored by the cruise ship disaster which my life has been, though I still find myself offering up every now and then some stale, cynical witticism, which might even manage to get a forced laugh out of this or that passenger, on this or that deck, in this or that party of some faux duchess of my own invention. But of course, all this is nothing other than the purest navel-gazing nonsense. There are no passengers on this ship, attendees at this party, no other worshippers in these churches, monks in these sanctuaries or at these altars. There is no one other than me. And I am now simply attempting to navigate the ever shorter days of the few years which remain to me with as little suffering as I can manage, all the while lashed to the mast of my self-constructed 2-bit Titanic. Look at me. I am nothing other than a wannabe Pulcinella, minus the great music. Cynical, cunning, greedy, needy, hypocritical, though still good now and then for the occasional dark, tepid joke. You know the sort, the kind that elicit at best a forced chuckle. But, rather, do not look at me. Please, look away, and not upon me. Not now, nor ever again. Oh dear, it seems my black heart is beating, unsteadily and feebly, yet none the less. Perhaps it wishes to cough up another mediocre tune. I shall, however, take great pains to not allow it the chance. This Pulcinella recognizes full well when something unseemly rises to the level of its being intolerable, for mediocrity is, has always, and ever been intolerable. And, thankfully, having been well taught, this Pulcinella also knows its manners as well as how to mind them.